In this video, I'm going to be sharing the top 20 tips of how you can communicate with yourself, your team, and your customers in order to get more of the things that you want. Please remember to like the video, comment, or ask any questions below the video. And of course, please subscribe to this channel so you get notified when I update new content ready for your practice. Let's get started. This morning, I'm going to be sharing with you my 20 top tips to help communication with yourself, your team, and your customers. And as always, good morning, Jeff. As always, I ask you to ask questions as we go along. So if I share anything with you this morning and you don't quite understand, please feel free to pop the questions in the Q&A box. Sometimes I allow you or encourage you to use the chat box. I'm going to be using the chat box this morning. So if it goes in the chat box, it might scroll off my screen so I don't get to see it. So if you have any questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A box. The astute of you will know that there's 20 of the tips. There are 60 minutes in an hour, which is as long as we've got this morning. So that's 3 minutes a tip. So we're going to be running through them quite quick. So good morning, Sandy from the States. If anybody's got any questions, or if you ask a question, I don't have time to answer it, then I will gladly do you a video and just expand on the question as best I can. So without further ado, get ready for the chat box. I'm going to share with you some quotes around communication. Some famous quotes, and all I want you to do is pop in the chat box the surname of the person that said the quote. So let's go. So the first one is, I have a dream. So pop in the chat box. MLK, Martin Luther King, brilliant, that's right. And then the next one is, I am the greatest. Who said that? Muhammad Ali. And then the next one is, be the change you want to see in the world. Who said that? John F. Kennedy. Gandhi. It was Gandhi. Brilliant. And then the last one, don't be a victim. Who said that? And all of a sudden the chat box goes quiet because don't be a victim is not a famous quote, and it wasn't me, VJ. No, it was Roger Stone. So Greenstone and Co. was formerly owned by a chap called Roger Stone before I bought the practice out, and there was a particular morning where I'd got some challenges going on in my private life, and Roger being a little bit older than me, I used to share those challenges with him. Roger was a bit of a father figure. And one morning when I was sharing those challenges with him, Roger said to me, Simon, don't be a victim. And those words stuck with me. It was almost, I wouldn't say it was a casual throwaway line from Roger, but I don't think Roger ever appreciated, as many times as I've told him, I don't think Roger appreciates what power those words had and what effect those had on my life. And every now and again, when I'm struggling, when I'm thinking about things and the way that relationships are not working, I will go back to Roger's inspiration around not being a victim. And I share that with you this morning to help you understand and appreciate the power of words and the way that you formulate words and the way that you use them. And I'm sure as I'm talking about Roger and the don't be a victim quote, there'll be things where, or times in your life where perhaps a father or a brother or a close friend has said something to you, shared a phrase with you that has resonated with you in that moment and has lived with you as the continuing advice. So what am I going to share this morning? As I said, we're going to run through these pretty quick in order to deliver as much value as we can. I'm going to, by the end of today, I've promised you that we're going to share the question that you must ask every single team member every single day. And it's fantastic around delegation, how to get to yes many, many, many more times. And then the simple switch that will help you remember things more often. And it's a really easy one. Once you hear it and you understand it, you'll notice people using this type of language all around you, and a way you'll be able to focus on it, and then you'll be able to correct them. Now, there's lots of stuff on here, Steph. I can only see half the slide on the screen. I'm not quite sure. You've got a little slider bar where you might be able to move the slider, and it might work if you slide it in the center. It's a gray bar, Steph. If you slide it over to the left, it might show up a little better, but it's working all right. I've got a test profile over here, so it's working all right on working. I got it. Thanks. Brilliant, Steph. So as I say, by the end, you're going to get the question you must ask your team member every single day, how to get the yes many more times, and the simple switch to help you remember things, plus 17 more options. Now, I want to give you a caveat. These things won't work 100% of the time. So you won't turn into the these are not the droids you're looking for, Jedi type master. It will not happen 100% of the time. You will need to work on it, but it will increase your odds of conversion. And the other thing that very often comes up as I share these 20 tips is the power of influence and the ethics that go behind it. So whenever you're using this language, you need to be very conscious about whether you're doing it for your aim, for your benefit, or whether you're doing it for a win-win scenario within the relationship. So just be conscious of the ethical aspect of it as well. And as always, as I say, keep practicing, working on it. And at the end of the day, I'm going to ask you for some actions that you're going to take as a result of being in this meeting this morning. So the first one, let me share with you the first one. The first one is the 3 times convincer. And I first discovered the 3 times convincer when I was training to be a chartered hypnotherapist. And you use a 3 times convincer in the induction phase of Erickson hypnosis. Now, the way that you use this is I ask you 3 questions or make 3 statements that I know are absolutely true in your scenario. And because of that, you answer subconsciously yes. Now, if I can get 3 yeses, then the 4th time I ask a question, you are much, much, much more likely to say yes to the question I asked. So let me give you an example. If we was in a hypnotherapy session, I might say, as long as I knew these was true, this morning you've woken up, you've traveled to my office, and now you've sat on the seat. So I know that you've woken up because everybody wakes up in the morning, otherwise you're dead. If they've traveled to the office, then I can obviously say that. And if they've sat in the seat, I can say that too. So you've woke up this morning, you've traveled to the office, and you've sat in the seat. And as I'm saying that to you, as you're sat in the seat, you'll be going, yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. Yes, that's true. And then I can follow up with something like, and now it's time. And your brain will go, yes, it is time. So this morning for you, we could say, you've woke up this morning, you've turned on your computer or your phone, and now you're logged on watching the information about the 20 top tips. So your brain will be going, yes, yes, yes. And then if I follow up with that question or another question, is now a good time to talk about how you might like to join the Accountants Mastermind? You are much more likely to say yes to that 4th question because of the 3 times. So basically a 3 times convincer helps you move people to a yes. And it's the 4th question that you want to ask. Some people are on a 1 times convincer. They're really easily convinced. So most people are on 3, and there's the occasional 5s and 7s. So that's a 3 times convincer. Next up is a yes tag. Now, a yes tag is just simply adding a couple of words to the end of a sentence, which makes it much more likely for somebody to say yes to your request. So if you're working, let's say you're working with a website designer, the website designer might say, this is a really good site, isn't it? And by putting the words isn't it on the end, it is much more likely for you to say yes. It would be nice if we went running, wouldn't it? Yeah, so the yes tag is the last couple of words on the end of a sentence, and your brain will go, yes, it would. So you are much more likely to say yes because of those words. And you've got yes, isn't it, wouldn't it, couldn't it, shouldn't it, anything like that. Generally speaking, they end with an it on the end. But if you put that yes tag on the end of a sentence, then as I say, people are much more likely to say yes to whatever it is that you're requesting. So it would be a good idea if we got your accounts done within 3 months of the year end, wouldn't it? Yeah, and they're much more likely to say yes to that because you've implied the yes to the end of the question. So that's yes tags and 3 times convincer. Next up, we have phonological ambiguity. Now, this is where you can use words that have 2 meanings. So you Structure your sentence. It's much easier to do this when you're writing copy on websites and emails and things like that. But you structure the sentence in a way and use words that have two separate meanings. So let me give you an example. In the beginning sentence, the first sentence, we've got like me by now, you know this makes sense. So like me is an instruction for you to like me. So like me, but it could be us together, like me. So together in this unit, we're together, or you like me. And then we've got by now could also be by as in BYE, so a buying instruction, a buying embedded command. You know this makes sense with a statement at the end. So like me, by now, you know this makes sense. So we're using, in that situation, we're using phonological ambiguity in order to get people to like us and buy from us. And there are some other examples on the slide that we can use. So there and there, here and here, see and see, weekend and week end. So obviously that's a weekend, or it's a week ending to something. I scream and I scream is a slightly more sophisticated one. I don't know and I don't know is a simple, there's just a bounce on the rhythm of that. You're unconscious now, you're unconscious now, and then obviously two and two depending on how you're working with that. So phonological ambiguity, changing the different words in order to create a different response from your audience, is another way of communicating far better. And you'll see, now you've seen that like me by now, when you look at internet ads and things on TV and whatnot, you will hear that phrase a lot in the language that marketeers are using. Next up is one of my favorites. It is negative positives. Now, there is lots of research out there that demonstrates that your brain processes negatives far slower than it does positives. It is always looking for the positive intention and very often misses the negative connotations of any sentence. So if you say something like, don't forget, what your brain hears is the positive intention in that sentence, which is forget. So people say, don't forget to turn off the light. And then what happens? They forget to turn off the light. Now, if you flip that round and say, please remember to turn off the light, you're saying and communicating exactly the same thing, but because it's all positive, they are much more likely to remember to turn off the light. So instead of don't forget, use please remember. Don't forget to file your accounts before the 9 months. Please remember to file your accounts within the 9 months. So just purely saying that out loud, you can hear the different and feel the different energy that flows through that response. Another one that you hear, people will say, I'm cold. Instead of saying I'm cold, say I need to be warmer. And as soon as you say, I need to be warmer, then your brain will start looking at ways to be warmer rather than reconfirming and making the statement that you are cold. So a couple of things, always use the word do as opposed to don't. And as I've just said, never use the don't forget, always use the please remember. And when you're talking to your team, be very conscious if you're asking them to remember something or not to forget something. So I think we're on to about 5 now of the top 20 tips. And as I said at the beginning, I'm not expecting you to write all these down and remember all of them and go away and use them all from today. What I'm asking you to do is think about a situation that you're in at the moment, a problem that you've got, or a situation that you're stuck in, and how one of these might enable you to take action off the back of the conversation that we're having today. So next up is the word and. Now, and is a really, really powerful word. As you know, when you're writing, the word and connects statements together or connects the sentence together and helps you move on as you're writing that communication. Now, if you use it in language, as I say, it's a very powerful word. It can encourage people to take further action and do different things. So let me give you an example. It helps you work out what is really going on. So say you sat down with a team member or a customer and the customer says, Simon, I'm really upset with the invoice that you've just sent us. Now, they might choose to stop at that point. And if they do, you can then say, and. Now, if you say and, they are much more likely then to expand on the situation that they find themselves in. So if you've got a team member perhaps that's struggling with a situation at work, or they're struggling to learn, if you, instead of them saying something and then you asking a question, if you just simply say, and what else? Then they will delve further and deeper into that problem, so you get a better understanding of it. Now, a much more challenging way of delving deeper is to use silence and just not say anything. So if somebody says that I'm struggling with reconciling a VAT account, instead of saying, so what specifically is it about the VAT account that you're struggling with? If you then don't speak at that point, they are much more likely to expand on what it is that they've shared. So using the word and silence, so no language whatsoever, will help people or encourage people to expand. Can be a bit uncomfortable sometimes, so you need to be a bit conscious of that. And then you've got the phrase, what else? And then if you build on that, you can use the phrase, anything else. Now, if we're in a conversation and I say to you, and what else? Because I'm saying what else, you are much more likely to expand on what you're talking about. If I use the phrase anything else, there's an unconscious signal there to the audience or to you, the person that we're communicating with, that suggests that there might not, it's a bit weaker. Can you hear the difference? What else? Anything else. It gives you permission. Anything else gives you permission to escape that conversation. So if you're presenting, this is used a lot, again, if you listen to people when they are presenting at the front of a room, they will very often, they'll say, what else, what else, what else, what else? And then when they've extracted all of the information, all of the points that they want to cover, they will then say anything else. And at that point, the audience will stop delivering answers. So the power of and the tyranny of or is another phrase that you will very often hear. So can we have both things rather than one or the other? So use the word and, what else, and silence. Next up, when I say we're flying through these, next up is to the word advice. Now, every single person, I say every single person is generalization there. Most people, they love to be asked their opinion. They love to give advice. And there's a phrase which I won't repeat about a certain part of the anatomy, and everybody has one. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody likes to be given advice. So instead of asking for help, can you help me reconcile this bank account? If you ask somebody for their advice, can I have your advice on how to reconcile this bank account? They're much more likely to say yes, and then help you deliver. So instead of saying, can you help me by bringing your accounts in or your records in by the 7th of the month so we can do your VAT return, you could say, can I ask your advice on the best way of getting your information to us by the 7th of the month, for example? And you then listen to what it is that the person that you're talking to says, and then subject to it being within the realms of possibility and all the rest of it, you can then help them deliver what it is that you want based on their advice to you. Now, there's another really interesting way of using the advice question, and that is around referrals. So many accountants find it difficult to ask their customers for referrals. If you say, hello, who do you know that we might like to work with, or who do you know that we might like to work with, that feels quite an aggressive conversation, an aggressive start. However, if you say to the customer or the supplier or whoever it is that you think might be able to offer you a referral, can I ask your advice? They will almost certainly say yes. And as soon as they've said yes, then you can move on to a statement such as, we're currently looking to expand our client base, and I just wondered if there was anybody that you know that might benefit from our services the same as you do. So you ask permission to ask the question, ask for their help. So can I ask you for your advice? It's a really interesting way of eliciting other people's help. Next up, appeal to people's fairness. I'm just going to have a drink of coffee. So everybody likes to think that they are fair. And we're taught it from a very young age, playing board games and Tiggy and all the rest of it. We need to play by the rules. And in order to play by the rules, we need to be fair. So if you appeal to a person's sense of fairness, they will go in, they will check in with themselves to see whether they feel as though they're being fair or not. Now, sometimes they'll go in and check and think, yeah, I'm being very fair and you're being unreasonable, and they will push back. But very often, when you appeal to their sense of fairness, they will check in and think, okay, if they're being fair, then I need to be seen to be being fair, and therefore you will gradually move into the middle. So let's have a look at the ways we can use some language. We both want to be fair, don't we? And then you make your suggestion, so what it is that you think is fair, and then you can ask the question, does that seem as fair to you as it does to me? Now, there's a way, lots of times this comes up as part of a fee negotiation. So I want to be fair to you and I expect you to be fair to me. And in order for it to work for both parties, we need to get to that sense of fairness. How about, and then you make your suggestion, we increase fees by only, say, 2% or whatever it was. Does that seem to as fair to you as it does to me? So you can ask the question, confirm that you want to be fair, you're looking to be fair. It needs to work from both sides. You then make the suggestion and then confirm that they think it's as fair as what you do. Now, I'm not saying that this always, they go, oh yeah, that's definitely fair, thank you very much, shake hands and charge me all that extra money, etc., etc. But you are much more likely in this scenario, if you use these words and appeal to their sense of fairness, you're much more likely to get to the result, to the situation that you want to be in, than if you go in controversially or confrontationally looking for the answer. So that's another one. Appeal to the person you're communicating with, their sense of fairness. So is it fair that you go home at 5 o'clock when I'm stuck here until 5:30? Or whatever it is where you feel as though the other person is being unfair and you want them to move more to your position. I think we're about halfway now, so I'm hoping that some of these conversations, some of these things, if you remember them, so please remember them, then if you implement some of them as actions, then obviously it will improve your communication. Next up is one of my favorites that you'll hear lots of coaches use. Now, if you've got a problem or somebody that you're talking to has got a problem, if you say to them, well, if you did know what to do, what would it be? Or if you knew the answer, what would the answer be? Then the person that's giving you the problem or presenting the problem to you, then they are much more likely to go away, mentally go away and think about a possible solution. So if you did know what you would do, if you did know the answer, what would it be? You'll be amazed at how many times they'll think about it and then they'll come up with a solution that they hadn't have thought about previously. Now, there's a real trick with this question. In fact, there's two, but fundamentally, once you've asked the question, you need to shut up. So you ask the question, if you did know the answer, what would it be? And then be quiet. And sometimes it's difficult because the person that you're talking to, the person that you're coaching, they'll go away and they won't necessarily look at the ceiling or whatever, but their mind will disappear. Their eyes will disappear. Sometimes they glaze over. And because of the silence whilst they're thinking, very easy for you to dive in and then ask a supplementary question. So if you ask, or when you ask this question, if you did know what would it be, you need to be quiet. You need to match and mirror their rapport. So you are comfortable, and then let them come up with a solution to the problem that they have got. Now, it might be that they sit there, especially if they're a bit shy, a little bit introverted, it might be that they struggle to come up with an answer. And if they do, if you become more uncomfortable, so you need to say something, instead of giving them the answer, you need to insert the magic word. And that magic word is possibly. What would you possibly do? Now, as soon as you insert that word possibly, then it opens up. So if you just ask the question, what would you do? Then you're asking for one question, one specific solution, and that could be right or wrong. If you insert the magic word possibly, then it opens up loads of possibilities. So it could be this, it could be that, it could be this. And all of a sudden they are much more likely to share. If they haven't already, they're much more likely to share all the different possibilities. And then you can go through each of those possibilities and coach them on the various scenarios and ultimately get to a situation that works for them, for you to implement, for them to implement, and they can go away with that solution. So simply, if you did know, what would it be? And if after you've been silent, they've not given you an answer, you've allowed them time to think, then you add the word possibly. What would you possibly do? And I'm going to come back to that word possibly a bit later on in this conversation. So next up is return the favor. Now, this is it's a bit of a script, and it's a way where you can elicit some help for something that you've done. Now, you know the situation the same as I still catch myself doing this. Is somebody, you do something for somebody, say for example, somebody emails you or they ring you up and say, do you know a good solicitor, for argument's sake? And you'll say, yeah, you need to use John Smith at ABC Solicitors Limited, and he will sort you out. And then the customer goes off and he goes and speaks to John Smith and they do a good job. And then he rings you up and says, Simon, I'd just like to thank you for recommending or referring me to John Smith. He did a fantastic job. And I'm really grateful for the advice and the support that you gave me. Now, it's very easy for me to say, don't worry about it. It's all part of the service. No worries, no problem. You know, you've heard all of the phrases. Somebody rings up, they've got a bank that doesn't reconcile, and you just tick, 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 and all of a sudden it reconciles. Or the VAT, they can't produce a VAT report for whatever, and you tick, 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 and away they go. Or they've not paid the PAYE and they need a penalty cancelling or whatever, and you just do it instantly. You don't charge any money for it, and then they are eternally grateful. And you say, "Don't worry about it. No problem. It's all part of the service, etc., etc." Now, if you use some different language, then you can elicit some help and support from them. And a chap called Rob Brown shared this with me many, many years ago. If you do a favor for somebody, which that effectively is, you've sacrificed some of your time in order to help them, subject obviously to how you're working with them. But if you've sacrificed your time, when you do a favor for somebody, in your mind, that favor, until it's returned, it ages like fine wine. So the favor mentally that you did, it gets bigger and better and more generous, and you was really helpful and supportive. And at some point in the future, they're going to pay that with another bottle of fine wine. However, the person that you've helped, if you don't elicit the proper response, the person that you've helped, they've gone away, and very quickly it turns into stale bread. So it's just something that happened last week. Good old Simon, he helped me out. He's bound to help me out again if I ask him to. And over time, the favor that you did for them becomes less and less and less significant. So when you're thinking about giving a favor, the best time to get that favor replied is at that moment when they say thank you very much, when the favor has just been delivered. Ask for something in return. So change the word no worries into, can I ask a quick favor? So when somebody says thanks, instead of saying no problem, no worries, don't worry about it, it's all part of the service, just ask, can I ask for a quick favor? And if you've thought about it before that situation arises, there are any number of things that you could do, they could do, you could ask for, and they could do in order for you to get something out of the relationship. So you could say, thank you very much. Can I ask a quick favor? They will always say yes. So you could say, is there anybody else that you know that might like to use their services, for example? So you could go into the referral script. You could also say, can I ask a quick favor? They say yes. Can I ask your advice? They say yes. And then you go into the referral conversation. You could ask them for reviews on Google, Facebook. I was going to say TripAdvisor, but we wouldn't be on TripAdvisor, would we? But LinkedIn would be another one. Comments and likes on YouTube. Return a favor. If you're finding this content of interest, then like the page, like the video, comment on the YouTube page, subscribe to the channel, etc., etc., etc. So have a list of things that you can do, or the person that you've done the favor can do, in order to help you. Another one that you can use is, do you mind just giving Joe Blogs? I've been looking after Joe Blogs, or been trying to convince convince Joe Bloggs to use our services. That's not great language, but if you've got a prospect that you're looking to work with that you can't quite get over the line, you can ask the person that you've just done the favor for to give that person a ring and give a live virtual testimonial or record a video or something like that. So don't throw them away. Bad language on my part. You see, there's a slip in there of the word don't. Do remember to ask your customers to return the favor if you give something away. So, and the best way of doing that is to have a predetermined list of things that you can ask for. So you're not caught on the hop. So that's return the favor. Next up, I can. Now I personally, I have a problem with saying yes. It's far easier for me to say yes than it is to say no. And in addition to that, I can always say yes, and then I fail to quantify what it is that I am saying yes to. So when you become conscious of this one or use this one, is instead of saying yes, just say I can. And then as soon as you say I can, it will naturally be followed by I can do that by. So if somebody asks you to do something, you can then quantify it back and say, yes, I can do that by Friday. Now, they might not think that Friday is soon enough. So they can come back and say, okay, but I really need it by Thursday. And then you're having a conversation about deadlines and delivery rather than saying yes, and they expect it to be done by Wednesday. So if somebody asks you a question, instead of saying yes, think about how you can use that question in order to quantify what it is that they want and make sure that it's within your schedule rather than their predetermined schedule. Because the worst case scenario there is they ask you to do something, you say yes, they think it's going to be done by Wednesday, and you think it's not going to be done till a week on Wednesday. So think about using the word I can in order to quantify the response that you are going to give. Now, the next question is the question that you need to ask every single team member every single day. And it is the one question that you can use in order to stop things arriving at your desk. And I am passionate about this question. It's one of the very simple tools and tips that I have used in order to help, I want to say educate, but the team to develop and things stop arriving on my desk. So, when you get a team member comes to you, let's use an example. They can't reconcile the PAYE control account, for example. So they come to you and they say, I'm having real difficulty. The PAYE at the end on the control account doesn't match the balance that they've paid on the following month. What should I do? Now, it's very easy for us as superheroes, because that's what we all are. We all love to give the correct answer. We've been taught that since school. We deliver the answer. They say, thank you very much, Simon. Okay, fantastic. And away they go. What it's done, though, is it's not helped that team member think about their problem. And it's obviously cost me time in order to deliver the information that team member wanted. So instead of delivering the information, the question becomes, what do you recommend? So what do you recommend? Now, as soon as you ask that question of a customer or a team member, they have to think, they have to take responsibility for what it is that they're asking and start to think about solutions. So it doesn't, instead of you taking it and then delivering on it, it leaves it with them, and they have to think about how or what they can do to correct their situation. Now, it's really easy for them to say, I don't know. And then you can say, well, if you did know, what would it be? Or what would it possibly be? And then they can think again, they have to go back and they think about it. And once they start thinking about it, then they are more likely to come up with a solution. Now, as you use this question, what will happen is they will stop asking you so many questions, because they know that if they come to you and ask a question, you're going to say to them, what do you recommend? And I've got it in the office. I sit there and sometimes people will come in and they say, have you got a minute? And I'll say, yes. And then before they've asked the question, you can see it going through their eye. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. And then they'll disappear, and then they might do the work, and then they'll come back and they'll give me the problem and the solution that they've come up with. But as I say, over time, they stop asking the question because they know that they're going to be asked, what do you recommend? And because they know they're going to be asked, what do you recommend? They will automatically come up with, in the vast majority of the cases, they will automatically come up with a solution before they come and ask. So if you're struggling with delegation or upwards delegation, so you've got team members that are passing stuff to you, the simple question to ask back is, what do you recommend? And then shut up. If they don't deliver an answer, or they say they don't know, then what, if you did know, what would it be? And then add that magic word, possibly, so they can come up with different solutions without being seen to be looking silly or giving a negative response. So if you do nothing else off the back of this conversation this morning, then start using that phrase, what do you recommend? Then that's the one thing for me and the way that you work with your team. Now, I've also already talked about how easy it is for me to say yes and how difficult it is for me to say no, and how you can use the word I can to quantify what it is that you're saying yes to. Now, there is another mechanism, another system that you can use, another 3 steps basically, in order to say no to somebody in a more polite way. And this is how it works. So step 1 is that you acknowledge the request. So you say something like, it sounds like a great idea, or that's really interesting, or something like that. You then clarify the circumstances that you're currently in. So you say something like, unfortunately, I've got a lot on at the moment, and I'm really struggling with workload, or something like that. And then you turn it into a positive. So perhaps I can help next time, or the next time you're looking at it, I'd be really interested in helping you with it. So acknowledge the request. It sounds like a great idea. Obviously, if it's a rubbish idea, then you need to tell them it's a rubbish idea. But generally speaking, acknowledge the request. They're coming to you with an idea that they think's good, and you being negative about it's not going to help the relationship. So acknowledge the request. It sounds like a good idea. Clarify the circumstances. But unfortunately, I have a lot on at the moment. So I'm really busy on a project or whatever it is. I'm about to go on holiday next week. Perhaps I can help next time, or next time you're working on that project, can we have a chat to see if I can support you? So acknowledge, clarify, turn it into a positive. That's a really easy way of saying no to somebody. Next up is to get buy-in. So this is sometimes called, when you go on some sales training, this is sometimes called selling the person on themselves. So everybody likes to be told that they're really good. And when you're told that you're really good, the endorphins go off, and it then makes it much more likely that you will say yes because you feel good about yourself. So if you're in a nice, good, positive emotional state, you are much more likely to say yes to people and submit, if that's the right phrase, to their requests for help. So if you want somebody to say yes, you can use phrases like, I'm asking you because I know I can trust you, or you are great at preparing accounts. Susie and I think you would be brilliant at ringing up customers and getting missing information in from the tax returns, or tax return missing information. So you sell the person on themselves. You tell them what they're good at, and then you ask the request, because in the moment, as you've told them how good they are at something, the endorphins will go off. And then, as I say, they're much more likely to say yes to you as a result of you selling them on yourselves. Now, what you will find, if you listen to people that have done a lot of sales training, software companies are very good at it. They'll tell you what a fantastic practice you've got, and how they've been following you on LinkedIn, and you've posted some really interesting things on social media, and you were growing really fast, and they love your brand, and they will tell you everything about how fantastic your practice is, and about how fantastic you are, and how interested they are in you. It's all that selling it on yourself, and then they will move on to and wouldn't it be better if, or couldn't you find use in delivering this service to your customer, or buying this piece of software, or subscribing to this product in order to deliver it to your customer? And because they've sold you on yourself, because they've told you how good you are much more likely to say yes to that request. So again, as you're talking to people, just be conscious about the language that they're using it, and why they are using it. Next up is another really interesting one. This one's a little bit more aggressive, but it's a really interesting one if somebody is talking to you in a negative way. So if somebody's moaning about something, if they're in a situation, they're being a victim, then you can ask this question in order to flip the conversation. And the question is, what do you want instead? So somebody's moaning about the fact that all the coffee cups in the kitchen are dirty. They never get washed up. Everybody leaves all the teaspoons on the side. They leave dirty cups in the sink or whatever it is. And somebody can go along, they can moan about that for days, or it feels like they can moan about that for days. As they're talking about it, if you ask them the question, what do you want instead? It's very difficult for them to continue with the negativity. They have to flip it and think about the positive. And as soon as you've got the positive, well, I want people to tidy up the cups before they go home at night. Okay, then you can move into the conversation about how that happens. So you've moved from negativity to positivity and then a systems process or whatever it is. If you get a customer that's complaining, so they've rang up, you've missed a deadline or whatever it is, and they're firing off, they're moaning, they're complaining about something, the first thing that you need to do is to let the kettle boil dry. So customer rings up, they're ranting away. Think about them as a kettle boiling. If you put your hand over the pipe, over the spout, you'll get burnt because all the steam's coming out. What you do is you allow that customer to boil dry, to vent until they can't vent anymore because they've said everything that it is that they wanted to say. And then you can ask the question, so what do you want instead? How can we move this forward? What can we do in order to help you? Conversations or questions around that, and they will have to flip. And if you've let the kettle boil dry, they'll be welcome to, because they'll have exhausted themselves on the negativity. Flip it over into the positive, and then you can start working on a solution for them. So what do you want instead? Next up is the phrase, the embedded command, tell me. So if you're working with somebody, if you are interviewing somebody, or you want to find out more information from somebody, so you say, for example, you've got a customer or potential new customer, and they sat down and you're asking them about their business and how their business works, and you're struggling a little bit to get the communication going, to get the rapport going. If you use the phrase, tell me, the embedded command, they are much, much more likely to expand on their answers. So if you said to an interviewee, so how did you get on with your professional exams, for example, they might say, oh, very good. And then you can use a phrase, so tell me which one you found the most difficult, or tell me which one you found the easiest, or tell me which customer you most like working with. Tell me what types of customer you most like working with. Tell me where all your business comes from. And that phrase, you can hear it again in the language, you can hear it in the energy, that embedded command. People are much, much more likely to share than if you ask the question without the word tell me at the beginning. So think about if you're struggling with somebody that's not sharing, you've perhaps got an introvert that you're struggling to have a conversation with, then if you just use that embedded command, tell me, you are much, much more likely to get a response. Next one is, again, used very often by salespeople. Now, if you make a statement and then you follow that statement by another statement, if you then ask a question, what the brain does is it answers the question. It doesn't query the first two statements. So let me say that again. If you make a statement and then ask a question, the brain answers the question. It doesn't challenge the two statements. So you might use it, again, in a sales process or sales situation. You might use it if, let's talk about websites again. So the salesman might say to you, we are the UK's #1 provider of websites to accountants, and we get 5 out of 5 stars on Google reviews. Do you need a new website? Now you will go yes or no to that question, but you won't challenge. You won't go, hang on a minute, who says that you're #1 website provider for accountants in the UK and that you get 5? Where does that come from? You don't go back to the original. So you might say, the Accountants Mastermind is the best mastermind group in the country for accountants, and we are growing membership. Would you like to speak to us about how you might join the community? And then you might say yes or no, but you won't challenge those first two statements. So if you would like to communicate something to somebody and you want them to take that as fact, then you ask a question at the end of the statements. Again, people use this in negotiation. When you're negotiating for businesses, you can make a statement about that business. So the business is declining and I don't think it's turning over what it should be. Is there a way that we can talk about having a cup of coffee at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, for example? Now, they'll answer the 10 o'clock question. They won't necessarily challenge the first two statements. So have a think when you go into a conversation. It's a bit more difficult, this one is, because it takes perhaps a bit more planning. Have a think about statements that you can make that you would like to confirm to the listener before you then ask a question to reconfirm those statements. So that is statement, question. Next up is what possibly. You can use this, as I said a minute ago, around coaching in particular with your team members. If you insert that word possibly into any sentence, you are much, much more likely to get a response. So what possibly would you like to have for dinner tonight? What possibly would you know, or who possibly would you know that would like to refer us, or what possibly could be happening with a set of accounts? Just insert that word. Sometimes it feels and sounds a little bit clunky, but the listener's not listening to that. They're just listening to the relief. So when you get asked a question, if you know the answer, there's this flood of relief that you know the answer and you're not going to look stupid. But if you insert the word possibly, then it removes that. So people are much more likely to give you an answer, because they're not being afraid of they're not being afraid of sharing that ideas and those concepts. So that's what possibly. Another great phrase that you'll hear lots of times in sales processes, but again, that you can use it when you're talking to customers, is the phrase most people. People like to be part of a community. They like to be the same as people. I mean, some people say that they don't. They like to be out there and all the rest of it on the fringes, but they're still within the confines. So if you use the language most people at the beginning of a sentence, people are then much more likely to comply with the information that you've just shared. So an example of using this is that most people get the tax return information to us by the 30th of November. Most people get the tax return information to us by the 30th of November. Now, if I say that to you, then you think, well, I am most people. I am included in that. I am like most people. And therefore, if most people are delivering the information by the 30th of November, then I should too. Most people sign up to the Facebook group once they've connected with me on LinkedIn. All right, okay. Most accountants sign up to the Facebook group once they've connected with me on LinkedIn. That's even more powerful, because especially if you're an accountant, most accountants, well, I'm an accountant and I'm like most accountants, and therefore it makes them much more likely to sign up. So just use that phrase at the beginning of a sentence. You are much, much more likely to elicit a response. Most team members wash up before they leave in the evening. Most team members, most employees, whatever language it is that you use, empty their bins before they go home. Most team members park in the car park in a straight line or whatever it is, and then you are much more likely to get compliance from somebody. Now we're coming towards the end, so just a quick couple to share with you the difference between this and that. And the difference between this and that is ownership. So if you talk about this, you have ownership of whatever it is. So this problem is something that we need to work on. That means that it's your ownership. You're owning it. This phone is mine. That implies that's ownership. This phone. Yeah. Now, if you flip it around and use the word that, then you are distancing yourself from the problem. So you will say things like, that problem is Susie's to solve. That problem is nothing to do with me. That phone is not mine. So when you're communicating with people, be very conscious of what you're taking ownership of. So that action is your action to undertake. This action is my action to undertake. You can't say this action is yours to undertake, because it implies that it's your action. So they are less likely in that scenario in order to undertake the action that it is that you want them to take. So be very conscious, this and that. And it's a really important one. This is when you're talking, when you've got a complaint. So if the complaint is about your practice, about your business, then it should be your problem to solve. If it's about the revenue or whatever, somebody else has not done something and it's reflecting on you, then it can be that problem. So that problem is caused by the revenue not issuing a PAYE coding notice or not accepting the RTI or whatever it is. This problem is because we haven't processed the RTI claim. So be very conscious when you're talking to people about complaints, what you're taking ownership for by using this and that. Now, this next one is quite aggressive again. So if people, and the easiest way to explain this is around pricing. So if people are making statements about your business, so that's expensive, your practice is expensive, your practice is slow at coming back to me, your practice never answers the phone or doesn't answer the phone quickly enough. If they're making statements, sometimes it can be complaints, negative conversations, then you can ask them compared to what. So your practice is a bit expensive, or compared to what? And very often they won't have anything to compare it to because they've not done any research. And as soon as you say compared to what, they're stuck because they've got nothing to compare it to. So your practice is slow returning telephone calls. Well, compared to what? Well, they might then compare you to First Direct or Virgin or Amazon or whoever it is, if they've even got a telephone number. But they might compare you to somebody outside of the industry and you say, well, okay, that's Amazon. I know that from an accountancy point of view, we return telephone calls within 3 hours. There's lots of accountants out there that don't return them in 3 days, let alone 3 hours. And you can get them to consciously think about what it is that they are comparing you against. So that is 19 of the 20 top tips. Now, before I go on to the last one, what I would ask you to do is in the chat box, if you can share which one of those tips has resonated with you the most. So is the one where you think, okay, that's really good, I can use that one now, or I can deliver it, or I can use it as soon as I get off this meeting this morning. If you could share in the chat box which it is, and then I'm going to have a conversation with you and just share the last communication tip with you and then wrap up. So we've got Steph is all over this and that. Nicola, please remember, Nicola, that's a really powerful one, the please remember. Martin, what do you want instead? It can be a bit aggressive, that if it's not used properly or used nicely. Smile when you say it. What do you recommend, Paul? Definitely is a really, really important one. VJ's on the don't and the do's. So do remember, I need to be warmer. Joanne's on the what do you recommend? Rachel, return the favor. That's a really, really good one, Rachel, in order to get you to help. Rob, compared to what? Not come across this one before yet. So again, it's a really, really interesting one. With Jeff, what do you recommend? Yeah, it's brilliant. You can just feel it coming out. So what do you recommend, Simon? And then they come up with a solution, and including the word possibly. Do not, don't, Sarah. Yeah. Does that seem fair to you? There's another brilliant one, Esther. Thank you. What do you recommend? Change to please remember, return the favor. We've got lots of things. What do you recommend? 3 times convince, right at the beginning, John. Negative, not positive. Appeal to fairness. So what I want you to think about, 3 times convince, right at the start. What I want you to think about is a situation where you are going to use whatever it is that you believe is the best one that you have seen this morning. I want to think of a situation where you're going to take action and start to structure and work out what it is that you're going to say and how you're going to say it. So predetermined response, so PDR. So when something happens, you've predetermined your response to that situation, so you are much more likely to deliver that response rather than saying the same old usual waffly stuff that you're going to do. And then write that action down. Now, my last one is a phrase: no, you won't. No, you won't. Now, if somebody says this to you, nearly everybody's reaction is, I'll show you. Yes, I will. I'm going to do it. Yeah. Now you can't use it every time. So just think about the actions that you said you're going to take. And I'm going to say to you, no, you won't. So you won't tell me what action it is that you're going to take. And then you are much, much more likely to do it, to take action. So if you've got a team member and a team member says to you, I'm going to ring 20 people by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and get all of their tax return information in. If you say, no, you won't, they are much, much more likely to do it than if you just say, okay, then Tommy, yeah, go and get on with it. Great. Fantastic. Go on with it. Now, if you use it every time, then it loses some of its effectiveness. I know somebody that uses it a lot, and then they add a penalty into it. So they create some pain in order to make sure that the action happens. So they create a bet. No, you won't. I'll bet you 10 quid that you don't. Now, as soon as somebody says that to you, I can feel it in my own physiology, in my own emotional makeup. I know it makes it much, much more likely for me to do it. So I'm going to share this video. We're going to share this video in the Facebook group a bit later. So please comment and add any questions or anything that you need some clarification on, and I will gladly answer them. There's no questions in the chat blocks, and I'm about 5 minutes early, so I'm just going to leave you with this slide. So if I show you this slide, what words instantly come to mind? If you want to pop those in the chat box. Thank you and good night. Smooth operator, John. Yeah. Thank you and good night. So he's cool, dude, and it's good night for me. Thank you and good night. Big smile. So I've obviously got my language slightly wrong. So when I think of Trevor, the thing that comes to me, the words that come to me was "and finally." So before the funny segment at the end of the news each evening, he used to say "and finally," and then he would share a light-hearted story in order to leave you in a better shape than what you would be if you'd that if you had just listened to all the negativity. So that for me is Trevor McDonald, Sandy. That for me is the phrase that I remember Trevor always saying. So we've got no questions in the chat box. So I'm going to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming along. As I always say, I would love to hear what actions it is that you choose to take. Either email them to me or pop them in the Facebook group or pop them in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube below, and I will gladly share them. And they think it's all over. And yes, it is now. Thank you for watching this video on my top 20 tips to help you communicate with your team, your customers, and yourself. I hope you found the content useful, and most importantly, I hope you take action with what you've discovered and learned today. On the screen now, you should be able to see 2 boxes of some more videos that I've got where I share content in order to enable you to improve your practice. And as always, please remember to like the video, comment with any questions below the video, and subscribe to the channel so you get notified of my future uploads.